Oliver Burkeman, author and journalist for the London's Guardian newspaper, used to be a productivity expert. For years, he ran a column in The Guardian on the latest, greatest productivity crazes, color-coded planners, email response hacks, to-do list generators. And after all that time, he should have been able to use his time to its greatest advantage. But over time, for him, something shifted. He realized that for all his passion for efficiency, for all these ways that he had investigated for wringing more out of the hours in his day, he continued to feel behind. He had become overworked and anxious, still unable to get it all done. And more than that, he had a growing suspicion that his efforts to get ahead were actually putting him behind in terms of the big things in life, the major decisions and projects that would make him feel most fruitful and fulfilled. Over time and through his own therapeutic medium of reading, research, and reflection, he came to a new way of understanding how he wanted to relate to time, the result being his 2021 best-selling book, 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. Now I have to tell you, this was one of the most consequential books I feel that I have read in the last many years. Its insights were like a tuning fork, finding resonance at the very core of who I am as someone also committed to productivity. And the minute I finished reading it, I was inclined to turn back to the first page and start again. This book dramatically changed how I think about each day and also contains some unexpected and very encouraging affirmations for the religious life. And I would commend it to anyone who has ever worried they're not getting it all done, or who has felt they need to reforge their relationship with time because of a life change like parenting or retirement. But just in case you aren't inclined to pick up this non-self-helpy self-help gem, I'm just going to summarize a few of the key insights for you. How about that? One person's excited about this. I'm going to sell you on this. Time management for mortals. There's so much more in there, but just let me say, first off, some bad news. And I want you to hear this very clearly. You will never be able to get it all done. You will never be able to get it all done. Never. Whatever all of it is to you, you're never going to do it. Sorry to be the one to tell you. That's because you don't have enough time. It's not a perception problem. Your time is limited by a rather significant factor about you, which is you are mortal. Sorry to be the bearer of that news too. Your mortality is at the very core of your humanness, and you can't escape it. The title of Berkman's book, 4,000 Weeks, refers to the average human lifespan, a pitifully brief 4,000 weeks, if you live to be about 80, less or more in some cases, in which there will inevitably be more to do, more that you want to do than you can do. Berkman says embracing this limitation is the first step to being liberated from the tyranny of the clock. So if you don't hear anything else today, hear this: you're never going to get it all done. Second insight: because your time is limited, you will be forced to make choices about what to do. Again, you can't do it all. You can't. You just stop trying today. You've heard this now. You will be forced to make choices about what to do, and those choices will inevitably be uncomfortable because they will involve missing out on a bunch of wonderful stuff that you would do if you could do it all. Right? There's lots of great things that we could do out there, but we can't do it all because you're mortal. Summarizing this difficult dynamic, Berkman writes, "We have been granted as humans the mental capacity to make almost infinitely ambitious plans, yet practically no time at all to put them into action." This is sounding like a real downer. Don't worry, I'm going to bring it back. You're mortal, you're never going to do everything, but I'm going to bring it right back. Because the last point, we humans tend to spend an immense amount of energy avoiding the painful reality of our mortality. And consequentially, we tend to spend a lot of energy avoiding the painful choices about what to do and what not to do. Sometimes it's all just a little more than our mortal brains can handle. And this is a fact that makes us very easily distracted. Now, here's an example. Should I make this painful choice about what to do with my brief life that would inevitably lead to missing out on something equally cool I could do? Or should I use my time to do things that are much easier and offer some minimal dopamine rush of accomplishment satisfaction, but really offer no meaningful advancement of my values or personal developments, something like sending emails? And let me tell you what is true. Science and Berkman both confirm this. Your brain's going to choose email every time. It's way easier than trying to make real consequential decisions about what to do with our limited time. And side note, I should say, after reading Berkman's book, I have become completely convinced that the existence of email in its entirety is a massive mortality avoidance mechanism that the entire human race has allowed to consume its collective life. So if you get an email message from me in the next couple of weeks, you just write back and say, no, are you avoiding your mortality, Pastor Liz? I can respond to this. You can call me on the phone, right? But there are other things, too, that we do, easier things than making hard choices. We scroll. Who's a scroller? It's amazing how time disappears while we're scrolling. We're reading media. We're shopping, right? Even sometimes reading the news. But Berkman's point is that they are distractions. In fact, they are distractions from distractions. And if we are to really live into this mortal life we have to double down and find ways to clear those away and focus on what's really important to us. So that's Berkman's thing. I hope that you will go read this book. I really do think it's an important one. But other than offering you an extended review and 5-star Amazon recommendation this morning, it's a distraction piece that I really want to focus in on and think a little bit about, because I think it's related to both of our scripture texts this morning and to our entire Lenten journey. I think distraction seems to be at the core of both the Genesis story and this story about Jesus in the wilderness. You know, we often talk about this bit of Adam and Eve that we just heard as the fall or as the great temptation. But reading it this week, I was wondering if it might just as aptly be described the great distraction. Right? The fact is, Adam and Eve do have a purpose in the garden. They're there to exist and enjoy. They're there to tend to what grows, and they're there to commune with God. But the serpent arrives to say, would you rather do this instead? Eat this apple? And it's almost as if that little suggestion distracts them from the original purpose, this awareness of other alternatives. Now, maybe you are some traditionalists out there and you think framing it that way leaves out a lot of the traditional theological overtones of this passage, particularly those about original sin and temptation. But I think this new vision actually is worth exploring. That the problem is that we've gotten distracted. And actually this tracks with a lot of other world religions' perceptions of what has gone a little bit wrong with humanity. Islam's idea of sin is not that we're so bad, but it's just that we regularly forget to be who we are. So anyway, we get distracted, and that is what is important. Maybe thinking about Adam and Eve that way lets us set aside some of the baggage related to depravity and helps us focus on the very natural fact that we do the same, that we get distracted from what's truly important. Our minds get drawn away from our sacred identity. They get drawn away from our calling. And then we wander around feeling like something isn't quite right, like we're not ever getting to the one thing we're truly meant to do, and we wonder what's happened. We get wooed by many serpents in this world who would like us to pay attention to everything but the deep truth of our belovedness. And when I say serpents, of course, I do not mean slithering things on the ground, but never-ending pings on our devices and never-ending new and necessary products and all the things the world wants us to think are most important, but which in the end cannot fill our truest desire, which is to be with God and enjoy God forever. And now you're thinking you're going to just give up Twitter for Lent and end the corrupt world's grip on your attention, which may be the right thing to do, but let me tell you something more. Sometimes those distractions come from inside of us. Sometimes they are external voices trying to get our attention. Sometimes they are internal voices telling us we're not enough, or telling us that we don't have enough, or telling us to seek attention, control, and perfection rather than things that truly lead to peace, like humility and compassion and sacrifice. You know, that's where it gets really interesting, because Jesus seems to have had a similar sort of set of thoughts swirling around in his own soul before he starts out his ministry, which seems to be why he goes out to the wilderness. To clear out everything that might take his attention away so that he can begin to deal with the distractions that are in his own soul. And then he finds them there, right? This story is about distraction too. Someone appears and says, "Wouldn't you rather have power, Jesus, than principle? You could get so much done. Wouldn't you rather have wealth than trust in God's provision? Wouldn't you rather have total control than surrender to this mortal life that God has given you to live?" Jesus goes into the wilderness to face those demons and to make the hard choices to pursue God's calling over and above the low-hanging fruit of the world's temptations. In fact, his answers to these temptations can be instructive for us as we seek to do the same. He listens to God. He listens to his own moral compass. He listens to the wisdom of his tradition. And certainly we can lock on to those same things too as we go on our own journey to clear the distractions out of our souls, which is another way of saying as we go through Lent. Now, you know, years ago as a young adult still learning to explore my own spirituality, I used to give up something super significant for Lent every year. I was into it, man. I was like committed practitioner of Lent. One year I gave up all sugar, and I was just there spiritually preparing for the promised land of a cinnamon roll on Easter morning, right? One year I became vegan and gave up all animal products and thought that God had called me to this disciplined regimen. I was so excited to celebrate the resurrection on Easter with some bacon, right? One year I gave up driving completely. Though it actually didn't work out so well because we lived in Massachusetts and it was very cold. And instead of taking time to explore nature, I just annoyed Jason with my constant requests for a ride. But the point is that I thought that deprivation was the means and the end of this spiritual season, that was where the meat was. Because I hadn't been given any clear guidance, but I no longer think that way. Now I think about Lent as a season to just practice paying attention, to do whatever I need to do in my own life, to tend to God's movements and summons. If I need to clear away some things in order for that to happen, I can make those choices. But I know that such deprivations shouldn't be arbitrary, like giving up M&Ms, but rather they should be related to my work of returning to communion with God. And my encouragement to you in this season is really to just do the same. To think about this time, the next 6 weeks, as a summons to just pay attention. To practice in this time the kind of intentionality and sacred focus that could characterize the other 39,994 weeks of life if we are at our best, right? As Berkman says, what you pay attention to will define for you what reality is. And I think Lent is a time when we can double down on seeing the reality of God's love and grace and presence not only in this world but also in our own lives. And so I just invite you to think carefully about how you can do that in the days to come. And maybe it's just reading the devotional. Maybe it's silent prayer. Maybe it is giving up M&Ms if that's your thing. Whatever it is, let it be connected to the deepest longing of your soul and your awareness that our time here is limited. Ask yourself, what do I want to listen to in this time? What do I most need to hear? Ask yourself, what do I long to remember? And when you sit to practice or to eat or to sing or to be silent, remember and remind yourself that that's what you're doing. Listening for the voice that calls you back to who you were meant to be. Remind yourself that this is not a time of needless deprivation, but real time of tuning in most deeply to the divine, to grace, to love, to sacredness, to beauty, knowing that that is how we open ourselves to the presence of God's messengers who minister to us in our need. So I offer you that invitation in the name of the God who created, who redeemed, and who sustained us throughout our 4,000 weeks and beyond. Amen.